2. All right, let me just find my presentation button. Okay, there we go. Okay, so can folks see that okay? Yes. Awesome, thank you. Okay, so welcome everyone. I am glad that you have decided to spend some of your Friday evening with us here today. I'm really excited to be able to present some different topics to you all tonight as part of this mental health awareness event, grad school edition, that has been kind of collaboratively created between myself and the wonderful representatives that you all have here within SACNAS. So my name is Laura Zavala Membreno. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a counselor with CAPS. So I will have a chance to share some more about CAPS and the services that we offer. But before that, we'll be getting into a few different topics related to mental health and self-care. So, and bear with me, y'all. I'm going to do my best to keep an eye on folks as they're jumping in to admit them into the space, and also keep an eye on our chat. So, if you'll allow me some grace as I navigate the different components of Zoom, I would appreciate it. Okay, so first things first, since we are coming here to talk about mental health, this is an opportunity for us to practice it just while we're even here in this virtual room with each other. So this is a casual space, it's meant to be, so feel free to decide for yourself if you want to have cameras on or off. If you choose to participate today with some comments or reflections, you can unmute yourself or you can use the chat. And if anything causes you to step away, feel free to take a break, come back as you need to. These slides, I don't know if I explicitly shared with y'all, these are available to you. And so if you'll have this to come back to and reference, and it's got some great resources. So if you need to take a break, totally fine. I need a break because something got caught in my throat like right as I was speaking. Good stuff. So I wanted to actually do like a brief little check-in. I think, do I have to stop my sharing? No, I don't. So I'm gonna launch a poll really quick. Just 3 short questions. So if you wouldn't mind, I would love to know where you are. And this will give us a sense of where we all are. So just checking in with how we're feeling as we come into the workshop together today. Ooh, answers coming in. Okay.
I actually didn't know that Zoom had a poll feature.
Yeah? Oh, it's fun. I love
really
polls.
cool.
Yeah.
You learn something new every day.
Exactly. You know what? Teamwork. Teamwork makes the dream work. I wish I knew how to do like, yeah, I can't do like the fun polls, you know, so this one's it's kind of plain, but it's all right. We'll go with it. So let's see, got 75% of folks responding. Can y'all see this on my screen? The poll results or no?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll share in a moment. Let me see. Let me give it another like 20 seconds.
It's like a lot of people are feeling kind of not energetic.
Not energetic. Yeah. Okay, let me give it.
I did just come back from like a bike ride, so.
Oh.
Okay. Oh, you exercised before this. That is.
Yeah, I may have skewed those results pretty low too.
Okay, let's see. Okay, can y'all see? No, can y'all see that? No. Sure. Okay, I think that's shared. Can y'all see?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Popped up for me, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I see it.
All right, so most people on the lower end of the energy scale, 2 folks out of 7. That's not bad. That's all right. I'm probably like 7, 8 maybe. Nobody's doing excellent in their mental health. That's cool. So kind of in the middle. Most people are like, I'm all right. What are we looking forward to? Let's see. Interestingly, not so much on mental health then. That's all right too. We will get into that. So, all right. Well, thank y'all for humoring me on the check-in. So that'll kind of help me to frame a little bit for today. Okay, awesome. So we have all of those topics and more. Who knows what we'll get into during our discussion today. But one of the things that came up is that there are so many topics that we could definitely talk about in our time together today. So we're going to be able to touch on all of these a little bit. There's definitely opportunity to come back and go more in depth into any of this, but I like the fact that we'll get to go a little bit broad today and touch on various different areas that affect us all to greater or lesser degrees. So first up is mental health. I wanted to begin this portion today with just a quick, starting off with the definition, because we use the term mental health pretty often, and it can be helpful to just kind of frame it. So I wanted to use this to frame our conversation today. What is this? What are we talking about when we say mental health? And I put this here because I feel like sometimes in our conversations, we might confuse mental health with mental illness. And mental health is really just another aspect of our overall health. So we all have physical health and we all have mental health. And just like on the physical side, when we look at the mental side of things, sometimes we feel a little bit better than others. And it's the same way with our bodies, right? Sometimes our bodies feel really energized and good. And at other times, we definitely feel much more fatigued and run down. The same thing's true for our mental health. Sometimes we might be feeling closer to that top end of the excellent scale. And at other times, we are definitely not. And, so I really like what it says over here in the graphic about mental health is something that exists on a continuum that, that we can feel varying degrees of wellness when it comes to our mental health. And the link to our physical health is absolutely inseparable. So when our body's feeling well, our mind tends to feel well, and then the same is true vice versa, though not exclusively. And I like this definition about, I like this definition because the part of it that I really identify so much with is that when we're in a state of wellness with our mental well-being, we feel like we can cope with the normal stresses of life. And one of the questions that I actually get a lot at CAPS and even during different outreaches is that students will ask, how do I know when I might need to try counseling? And one of the things that I always say is monitor your coping skills, because we all have coping strategies that we use to get through stress. If it's taking a bike ride or exercising, talking to our friends, spending time with your family, watching Netflix, reading a book that's not for school, we all have coping strategies. And one of the ways that we can start to know if stress is getting the better of us is if our coping skills are not working as effectively as they usually do, because that's going to impact how productively we can work and how much we want to connect with other people. And if I really feel like going to this event with SACNAS today, or if I'm not in the mood for it, our level of stress is directly related to our coping skills. And if what we're doing to cope isn't feeling as productive as it usually does, those strategies that we use just aren't cutting it, then I think it's a good time to just do a check-in and see where we're at, and see if talking to someone about it could be helpful. So obviously we know that there still exists, even though we are making progress. There's still some stigma around mental health, especially for communities of color. Like I'm coming from my background, like this is not a thing that really gets talked about. Or when it is discussed, it's done so in like some stigmatizing or shaming or like kind of judgmental ways. So one of the reasons why I really enjoy conversations like this is because we get to like really talk about what mental health means, and that it's not like that it's not something that is like just in your head, or it's not something that you're making up or anything like that, but it really is an integral part of our overall well-being. And the more we pay attention to it, the better off we'll ultimately be. So when it comes to our own university, a survey was conducted. This is a couple years old at this point, so I apologize for some of the dated numbers, but I think if anything, we've probably seen some of this go up in no small part due to the pandemic. So a survey conducted with students a couple of years ago found some findings like this. And when I look at numbers like this, it's pretty reflective of even what we tend to see here at CAPS. Like most students who reach out for support from us describe depression and anxiety as like two of the most common, overwhelmingly most common concerns. And like feelings of overwhelm between classes and preparing for grad school and internships and organizations and like home and family commitments. Like those are absolutely understandable reasons why students would feel overwhelmed by everything that's on the plate. And sometimes those feelings of overwhelm can be so intense that it feels difficult to function, to like get out of bed in the morning or to get assignments done or show up for class. And for over 10% of our students, which tends to track like pretty nationally, like at least 1 out of 10 students is going to seriously consider suicide at some point during their academic career. And like that's a really serious thing. Like we know that like support and like feeling heard and understood are so essential to preventing students from getting to the place where like they're feeling absolutely hopeless. So this hasn't been conducted in a little while, like I said, but I think when we take into account the effects of the pandemic, what we're seeing, not that we're out of those woods by any means just yet, but also how folks have felt affected by the last year and a half, mostly being virtual, being disconnected from family and friends, losing family members and friends. So there's a lot that we're going to continue to understand about how mental health has been affected by this pandemic, but what we are experiencing so far is all of this to a greater degree. So making sure that there are supports out there and that folks know what those are and how to access them is really more important than ever, I think. So that's why I'm glad I'm here. Was this my next thing? Sorry, y'all. Oops, ring a bell. Okay. So there are still many like barriers that we want to recognize exist. It's not as easy as having a counseling center at a university and just expecting students to access that. Like especially our students who've been marginalized, like we can't just expect them to walk through the door of like a counseling center. And there's many barriers that exist about like getting access to that support and like reaching out for it. So I wanted to put some of these up here. My goal isn't to read them off to you, but and I don't also believe that this list is like comprehensive by any means, but I do think it touches on like some of the most common things that get in the way. And when I'm sitting down with students, one of the things that I hear so often is, they'll say like, I've been thinking about this for a long time. Like I've been considering it. I knew it would have been helpful like a year ago, 2 years ago. and they've like managed to get themselves in the door now. And one of the things that I like to discuss with folks is like, we can know that support would be helpful, and it can still be hard to access it and reach out for it. Sometimes we might have had like negative experiences before, like that's unfortunately like a really common one, or we may be coming from a background where, again, like mental health is not really discussed, or if it is, it's only like in terms of calling somebody crazy or like mentally unstable. Or we're coming from a place where it's looked at, it's not really accepted or acceptable to like reach out for help, or to like talk to a therapist or a counselor or someone who's like outside of the family, because we should keep that like in-house. And apart from all of the like, I don't know, operational barriers, I guess, like transportation, insurance, costs, like knowledge, there's also just those like cultural or societal or even like familial attitudes that play a part in how how we might feel about like counseling and therapy. So yeah, I wanted to put this up here because I feel like it's important to recognize what these barriers are, and if we know what's getting in our way, then it can make it a little easier to like figure out what we might need to like overcome. So there's some folks that have been really kind and generous and willing to share some of their own experiences with the topics that we're discussing today. And so I'm going to enlist some of their support in touching on this and share the floor a little bit. So I'll turn it over to Arnold.
Hi, y'all. I'm Arnold Gonzalez. If you can tell, I joined late. It was a rush. I'm at a conference right now, an academic conference. But yes, I've dealt, just like right now, I feel pretty anxious having so much going on. I've dealt with anxiety, I guess my entire life. And I really didn't understand what it was or really how much it was affecting me until I got to Houston. For my graduate degree. So I was born and raised in the Rio Grande Valley, which is 6 hours south of Houston, directly towards Mexico, on the border of Brownsville. It was a big change for me, and I didn't have a backup here. I didn't have family here to kind of lean on in case something happened, which was really scary. And I'm from a background where if I don't support myself, I can't really rely on my mom because of her salary. And so it was really anxiety filled here my first few years, I guess. And even senior year and senior year in college and also in high school, I felt extremely heightened anxiety, and it got to the point where I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, because I was trying to choose different schools. I was also an athlete, and so I was trying to choose a team to play for, and it was really, really stressful. And hand in hand go anxiety and depression, I want to say, at least for myself. And so as I was getting more and more anxious with these things that I had to do and just allowing myself to be more stressed out, I also had family issues, and I had deaths within the family. And then COVID happened, and I've been indoors, and it doesn't really help my depression. And so ultimately it led to the inability to complete the things that I wanted to do. If I wanted to go out with my friends, I sometimes just didn't have the energy, or even doing job related things that I had to do for my productivity, it was all affected. And so a part of the reason why I didn't get help sooner was because I was embarrassed. I also have no insurance, so there's that monetary issue. And I come from a background which is not very affluent. And so alongside family pressure from my mom. And so I'm now getting help, and I do feel a lot better. It helps. And yes, I actually went to CAPS a couple of times, and now I use another on-campus resource for the psychology part of it, and I'm feeling a lot better. It really has helped me.
Yes. I know, I think what you shared is really important, especially a couple of things like really stood out to me. One is there is definitely a huge link between anxiety and depression. So like most people who experience one tend to experience the other. So it's super duper common. And like, yeah, a lot of co-experiencing of those feelings. And the other thing that you said, like, which I feel is really important to reiterate, is the fact that like counseling helps. Like counseling really does help. And I'm obviously a little bit biased. I do think it's beneficial. But you know, I can say like even from my own experience, like, and it's going to be a little different for everyone. Like sometimes our first or like even second experience with it might not be so helpful. I have seen a couple of really poor counselors like in my day. But when we like find the right person that we connect with, that we can talk to, that we feel understood by, like whatever that means, I think it can be really useful. And like whether, I sort of look at like, when I think of support, I think there's a few different pieces that come into that. And then, they might be like, depending on the person, we might pull on something from like each one of these categories. So I think of counseling and like therapy is like one of those pieces. I think medication for some folks can also be like really beneficial, especially when we use it in conjunction like with counseling. Like with my own mental health, I have seen a huge improvement when I opened myself up and was able to like let go a little bit of some of the like fear and the stigma that I even had like as a counselor around like medication. And I never ever approached it that way with people that I worked with, but when I came to myself and like my own therapist recommended it, I was like, no, you're wrong, I don't need it, I can do this by myself, like I don't need that. And I like had to go back to her like the next time we met and be like, you know what, I don't know what this like barrier is, like why I feel like it's so okay for other people but not okay for myself. Like I need to talk that out and figure out like what's my obstacle to that. Because I think a lot of times we tend to like have maybe some different like expectations for ourselves than we have for others. So I think there's like that piece can also be really helpful. And then the third piece of that, like if it's, I'm thinking of like a little triangle, is like the self-care, like self-help, kind of part of things. And I think that includes community care. So like who do we have in our lives as support systems, as people we can turn to? It is one thing and a really beneficial thing to have a counselor who we don't know in the rest of our life, who can be neutral and objective. And then like how do we also build in some more of those like organic supports with like friends or family or like other support systems that we can lean on as well. So I think all those pieces come into play. And like depending on the individual and their circumstances, like we might use one or more of those parts of the triangle to kind of help bolster ourselves up like when we need it. So thank you, Arnell, for that. I'll turn it over to our next speaker, Jacob.
Hey everybody, so my name is Jacob. Go by Jake or Jacob, whichever you guys prefer. I'm a second year biochemistry student here at the University of Houston, and I'm originally from Florida. I did my undergraduate at a smaller university called Florida Gulf Coast University. Big issue that I have, very similar to Arnell, and a lot of what she said mirrors me as well, like where you have anxiety, which eventually leads into like depression, et cetera, et cetera. I know the best way I've described those are almost like these like negative feedback loops that you can kind of get into as well. And this issue especially became more prominent and harder to manage as I got further into my undergraduate degree. It seemed like I probably have always dealt with this, growing up. I was probably I wasn't aware of what it was, but it seems like as I've gotten older, I was able to kind of say, hey, this is probably some form of anxiety that's causing these feelings. One example that it's manifests, right, is I had and still have major testing anxiety to the point where it can be debilitating. I was able to get through these tests, but I would always make very, very simple mistakes on these tests. And I remember I was sitting with my physical chemistry professor one time, and we were going over a question. I think it had to do with something ideal gas law related. And it was something simple that I had calculated everything correctly, but then I just plugged in a wrong number somewhere, right? And it's simple, but I know it happened because I was so anxious. When I'm at a test, I'm constantly thinking, oh, hey, like, I'm gonna make a mistake, I'm gonna screw up, I'm not gonna pass this class, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember he like looked at me one time and he told me like straight up, he's like, you would have been an A student if you didn't make these mistakes. So it was something that definitely caused issues just in my academic career. And it did affect my GPA all through my undergraduate career because I didn't go anywhere. I didn't seek any help at all. Even in my lab work, I would constantly fear letting my PI down, right? There was just this constant fear that I'm going to make a mistake in the lab. I'm going to do something wrong. I'm going to break a piece of equipment. And it would get to the point to where like those fears would cause me to make mistakes. Those fears also led into feeling like I didn't belong in this program, right? There was this feeling, and we're going to speak about it later, but it's feeling of being an imposter, right? Like, I don't know why I'm here, right? I feel like I don't know anything compared to these people. I'm making mistakes. I think the biggest thing that's actually helped a lot as I began actual therapy this spring, very recently, because my anxiety got worse and worse and worse, and I'm still working on it. This is something that's not fixed, and it's probably something that'll never be fixed, but I do highly recommend, just from my personal like experience, seeking help and sticking with that help, because these are problems that don't get fixed overnight if you do have them. And I know my therapist specifically described anxiety as this monster that isn't you, it's not a part of you, but it's just a void that kind of constantly pulls you back into this fear of what could go wrong, what could happen. And I always thought that was a very apt way of describing it, that it's not really you, it's this just monster that you have to kind of get in control of.
Yeah. Thank you, Jacob, for sharing, and also for sharing what I feel like is a really relatable metaphor about anxiety. And like, I'm so glad to hear that your experience with counseling has been helpful. Again, biased, so I'm going to admit that piece completely. But I really resonated with what you said about like seeking that help and then sticking with it, because that can be really hard. Like when we finally are able to like take that step and like reach out for help, and then we don't feel better, and then I still don't feel better, or like actually this time after therapy I feel a little bit worse, and then like we can feel discouraged if we don't see like progress like happen pretty quickly. And like you said, it doesn't happen overnight. And like it's not a, I mean, y'all have probably seen like what the thing like the healing isn't like a linear process. Like we have ups and downs in that. And I think it is important and like ultimately really helpful if we can stick with it. Something that I do tell folks too is like, if you're sticking with it and you're like consistently not seeing a benefit, or you're consistently feeling like the same or potentially even like a little bit worse like after your counseling sessions, then that's something to bring up, because it might be that a different kind of help or a different kind of counselor like might be a better fit. But so we should start to see like some differences at some point. And you've mentioned like that it has helped. But I think it is really important to stick it out, especially in the beginning, because that's when it can feel like the hardest and the newest and the most unfamiliar and the most weird. And so it asks us to push through that a little bit, which is hard when we're dealing with like anxiety and depression. So one of the things I heard recently about anxiety, this was actually in a meditation I was listening to, and it said anxiety thrives on negative predictions of the future. And I really liked that because, well, I feel like it's really apt. Like, yeah, our anxiety is always like, it's always about the bad stuff. Like, you know, I'm going to make a careless mistake. I'm going to break something. I'm going to, you know, it's always like negative things. And then if we're able to imagine like a negative scenario, then we're able to imagine like a positive one or even a neutral one. Like, I'm going to go into the lab today and it's going to be like pretty non-eventful. But that the anxiety is when we have those like negative future predictions. So I thought that was kind of become a mantra of me of sorts, like, okay, anxiety thrives on negative predictions of the future. So I'm not going to give it, as much as I can try, things to thrive on, right? So yeah, thank you all very much. So with that, I wanted to just kind of take a second to pause at the end of like this section. Everything kind of relates, but specifically this section, and see if there are folks that have other reflections or just comments that you might like to make about this piece that we've discussed so far. You can unmute yourself, or you can use the chat function. If you don't want to be identified, you can message me like individually and I can share without your name. I'll give folks a minute in case anybody's typing. Now I'm anxious about Zoom bombers, so there's my.
Well, I turned on the waiting room again, so hopefully we won't have anyone coming in anymore, but I will refrain from saying anything because I'm going to talk to you guys later.
I think for me, now that the topic of anxiety is brought up, like I had a little bit of anxiety 20 minutes before this meeting started. Not related to this, but I'm on Slack, about to upload my presentation to my collaborators, and one of my European collaborators just hits me up and say, hey, I got like an urgent question for you. And I'm like, okay, what is it? And so being like, it's the collaboration, she's gonna ask me something about research. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh shit, is she gonna ask me something that I don't know? That is always something that happens in the back of my head. Well, because I really don't like to say I don't know. That's sort of just my personality. I want to always just like be able to provide something, because in my sense, I kind of rationalize it as me not fulfilling a purpose for someone. Like, I'm not being useful to that person. So why should they even bother, you know, like asking me or like even associating with me? So kind of messed up how like my mind's made it that way, but you know, and then she did ask something that I didn't know. And so I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know. And it's even worse because like all of my collaborators are at this point have their PhDs. I am the only graduate student in collaboration. So, and these people are new. So, and I've been like the oldest member in this collaboration. So for them to come in and start asking me, you know, to catch up, and me just trying to do my best to really fill in what I know, as opposed to one of my other collaborators who's no longer a part of us, who's just like gone off to his own career now, trying to make sure that I can answer as much as I can.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that is completely understandable and like absolutely some like conditions for anxiety to pop up for sure. And I would imagine, even though we'll get to this in a bit, like some feelings of like imposter syndrome too.
Oh, a lot, constantly.
Yeah. So I would definitely love to hear more from you if you're comfortable like on that experience when we get there, because that is, that's a lot. Being part of a team where like everybody else has their doctorate degrees and I'm here like, what the hell am I doing here? Yeah, for sure. Anybody else?
Any of our undergraduates want to say something?
I can't see everybody. No one coming off mute. We're just still on. We're still on mute.
Nah, I think everyone.
Well, it's never too late if you want to throw something out, like I said, or if you want to do it privately and just send it to me, I will keep your name off of things if there's comments you want to make anonymously. So, oh, it's our next section. I thought it was later. Sweet. Okay. I'm actually going to start this section with a video that's a couple minutes long. If I can get my audio to share, let's see. Let's see. If I just play, will y'all be able to hear?
It's something you have spoken a
Can
little
y'all
bit
hear?
about. There was a question from one of our leaders from Indonesia, feeling you're not good enough.
Yeah. How many people, this imposter syndrome, does everybody know what we're talking about when we say imposter? It's like,
I don't really know that term.
Well, particularly for minorities, there's this feeling like, because you've been told that you're not good enough, that when you're in a room, you're wondering, well, how did I get here if I've been told I'm not good enough? Women feel it oftentimes because society says you shouldn't be doing that, right? So you feel like an imposter in your own life. You feel like, especially if you've achieved success or you're in rooms that you're not supposed to be in because society has told you that, you think maybe somebody is going to discover that I shouldn't be here, right? That's imposter syndrome. Does that make sense?
It sure does.
So what I tell people is, okay, and all I can do is tell you this, because imposter syndrome it's a thing in your head. And, it's just like self-confidence. It's just like, it's like any internal characteristic. Much of it is what you practice telling yourself, and if you've heard that you're not good enough, that's what you're practicing. I'm just here to tell you it is not true. You wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be doing what you're doing if you didn't belong here. And I also have the advantage of, and I say this not with any level of arrogance or lack of humility, but I have been at so many powerful tables now, right? I've been at, I've worked in every sector. I've been a lawyer at a big law firm. I've worked at an academic university, been associate dean. I've been the vice president in community development at a hospital. I've been, I run a nonprofit organization. I worked in the government. I worked with the mayor in the city of Chicago. I worked in the Department of Planning and Development. I was First Lady of the United States of America. I've seen these seats. I've served on corporate boards. I've done it, not all, but I've done a lot. And I'm just telling you, there are a lot of people who don't belong there. And every table, I thought it was me. And after a little bit, I was like, nope, it's him. It's this guy who's sitting here talking.
But they
all
act
the time.
so well. They act like they belong.
That's because they've been told they belong there. They don't. But there's a presumption. That's what I'm saying. It's in his head too. He's like, I belong here. And I'm like, no, you don't. So all I can tell you is that the person sitting next to you was told, based on nothing, that he belongs there. And you were told that you weren't. Both things are wrong, oftentimes. So what I had to learn to do for myself was being, age helps you with imposter syndrome. So I'm 55 now, and I've seen it. I've been waiting to be as bad as people told me I would be, I've been waiting for when I was going to fall and mess up and fail. I've been waiting because that's what they said. I didn't belong at Princeton, right? I applied to Princeton University. My college counselor said, that's school's too much for you. Well, I applied anyway. I got in. I was waiting for it to be hard and for everybody else to be so much smarter. They weren't. They weren't. They were just told that they belong there. Same thing was true when I would apply to Harvard Law School. Maybe I shouldn't be there. Got there. Nope. They're not any smarter than me. So with all the practice of just going into the room that you weren't supposed to be in and being there and occupying those seats and just doing you and knowing that your thoughts are just as relevant, your experiences are just as important, your insight is just as valuable, so that you will share it and use it and practice being there. That's the work you have to do if you feel like an imposter, because he isn't giving up his seat easily. He isn't going to just say, oh, I understand you don't feel like you belong here. Well, let me make room for you and sit you down and tell you the things you need to hear. They're not going to do that for you, because a lot of times they don't even want you there, even when they need you there. So you can't count on somebody else giving you the self-confidence. That's not how we work, you know? And that's why you all are important, because you're not going to do that for some kid in your life. You're going to make sure that they never feel like an imposter. You're going to help them practice a different set of messages, so they aren't sitting here wondering where they belong in places where we need them. We need women and diverse minds and people who think differently and have different religious beliefs, because truth and the right answer comes from diversity of experiences. You know, you're needed at those tables. So you can't sit there wondering whether you belong, because you'll waste your time in those seats and you'll hold your voice back and you won't be able to make change because you're waiting for somebody to tell you that you belong. I'm telling you, you belong. Practice a different set of messages.
Thank you for saying that. So important.
Any initial reactions before we move on, just from listening to that? It always gives me like chills to hear her speak. Just love her. Okay, I'll move on.
This is about to
Wait.
touch on.
There we go. Okay, we don't need to watch it again. Y'all have the link for it. So, what is imposter syndrome? I thought this. I don't mean to make light of the experience by including this little cartoon, but I feel like it's really accurate of the experience. But basically, what we're talking about when we use this term imposter syndrome is what we see here. It's these like chronic, persistent feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt that, despite evidence of success, despite the way Michelle Obama talks about, like, despite making it in the room, that questioning of whether or not you really deserve to be there. And a very common experience. What I would add, or actually what I would change from what she said in the video is this quote here, is that imposter syndrome is it's not always like just coming from you. One of the things that she says, it's like it's just a thing in your head, but not always, and not for everybody. That for people of color, for people coming from like historically and currently like marginalized backgrounds, these feelings of not enoughness and not belongingness, like those aren't just things that we're making up in our head. Like these are actual messages, sometimes actual literal messages that have been received about belonging in spaces. And it can be both like an individual, like actual experience of being told this, but this is also something that is built into like our institutions. Like this is structural. So I didn't want to discuss this topic without acknowledging that a piece of imposter syndrome is systemic and intentional. One of the things that we were talking about before today's presentation even got started is like this tendency of like the academic field to like put everything in jargon that can be almost impossible to decipher if you don't have like the specific like academic background in that topic. And like how that, and not just specifically related to STEM and the sciences, but how in lots of fields, like that's a way of gatekeeping. Because if I can't even understand like what you're saying, I'm not going to be able to imagine that position as something for myself, like that trajectory being something that I can pursue. So it keeps me out, and it keeps other people like me out. And you know, at their founding, right? Even the very institution that I'm sitting in right now isn't one that was built for people like me or like you. And so there are a lot of things that we can do within ourselves and with and for each other to combat these messages that are still very inaccurate about the ways that we don't belong in spaces. And I also think that there's, you know, things that can happen on a systemic level to change, to change that as well. So I feel like that was an important point to mention. So how do we deal with it? What do we do with these feelings when they come up? I think a part of it, and for me, the first part of things is awareness. It's about recognizing that those feelings and thoughts are coming up. And, you know, I think a piece of that is also knowing, like, how does that tend to show up for you? When it comes up for me, and I am sitting in a space where I want to say something, but I'm questioning if I should even say it. Like I start to get this like a heat kind of like rising in my chest, like almost like calling me to speak, and I can feel these like things getting in my way. Also anxiety, but at other times it's very much this like imposter experience. And so it's recognizing when they're coming up for us and how that feels and what passes through our mind so that we can catch it when it happens. One of the things that that's said in that video that I really love is her recommendation to practice a different set of messages, that we can rewrite those thoughts of imposterness that come up for us by practicing a different set of messages. And if those messages, the new ones, are hard to think of for ourselves, it can often be really easy if we think about it for another person. If you think about, like, if someone else that you know or that you care about, or like a mentee that you have, if they were coming to you with these feelings, like, what would you tell them? And it tends to be pretty easy when we put it in that frame of mind. So maybe we need to distance ourselves from it a little bit and imagine that it were someone else. And then it can be easier to come up with what those different messages would be. There's also some evidence to suggest that imposter syndrome can be a more common experience for folks that have a like fear-based relationship with failure. And who doesn't at the end of the day? But one of the things that we can do to like help support ourselves with that is to reframe the ways that we think of failure. And looking at, I'm still very much working on this, but looking at failures as like learning opportunities, or thinking about failing forward, that you know, that like when we like don't successfully accomplish whatever we set out to, like that teaches us things that we can apply to the next time, and then the like time after that. Or there's also and these are both in quotations because you can look them up if you want to, but there's also this idea of like a growth mindset, and that compared to a fixed mindset, growth mindset puts us in the frame of mind that like we are always learning and growing no matter what, through every experience, and including the pitfalls that we're learning through those. So it reframes our relationship with failure from something scary and like fear-based to something that we can like learn from. Easier said than done, but one of the coping strategies we have available. And then we can also like remember that we're not alone in it, that other people feel this way too. I don't know that I mean, everybody doesn't feel this way, but there are many, many other people that do like have this experience sometimes too, including some folks that we might look at and like assume that they never feel that way. I can remember a very specific experience of going to one of my like most trusted mentors. She supervised me throughout the time I was getting my license to be a therapist, and she's, I mean, been doing therapy for longer than I've been alive, like on the planet. Someone that I look to with like so much respect and like admiration. And I went to her one day, like super discouraged about the way that one of my sessions had gone. I was feeling like the worst counselor in the world. I'm probably not instilling a lot of faith in you if you were ever to like want to see me at CAPS, but this was a long time ago. All right, I've been doing this for a while since then, but I was really upset about how a session had gone, and I told her this, and then I remember in response, she told me, you know what? Some days I feel like tearing up my license too. And I was completely blown away at the fact that like she, who I put on this pedestal for like the example of the kind of clinician I want to be, would ever feel like she had not done an amazing job. And so she shared with me like how she feels that way sometimes, and when she missteps, and when she like gets things wrong, and it made me, in addition to making me feel like so much better, it really helped me to like remember that even when I might look someone and a student that like they just have it all together like all the time, that like those might be feelings that like they experience too. So anyway, little anecdote. I think a way to also cope, especially, you know, for folks of color, is to recruit a mentor. In an official way or an unofficial way, having a mentor and a person to go to who is doing what you want to be doing, and can help like lead us through like some, you know, of those pathways, including the obstacles that get thrown in the way, can be a really, really great source of like social support. And affinity groups can also be great spaces. So groups like this, where you have people who are coming from backgrounds like you, who are, you know, wanting to like pursue the same kinds of like professional endeavors, like that can be incredibly comforting to like be in a so I'm thinking about like my Latinas Reach space, and being in there with other Latinas who are pursuing like graduate programs, like just like I am. It's like, oh, I can breathe because you get it. Like you get it, and I don't have to spend all this time explaining it. Like you just get it. So join one, create your own. That opportunities are endless. And this last one came out of a presentation that I attended last semester about documenting your accomplishments. Like, so I went to a presentation by this wonderful presenter, and she talked about creating a hype book. Has anybody heard of this before? It was my first time hearing about it. Essentially, I've made one since, and y'all, it is great for combating the imposter syndrome. Basically, you just like make a book. It could be like a journal. I got one of those like art pads that have like the spirals, and you just put in there all the awesome things that people say about you. So like when you get that email, like, oh, it was like really great talking with you today, or like, thanks so much for like being a part of like this event, you print that shit out and then you paste it in that hype book. So I made a hype book for grad school specifically. I started with my acceptance letter, and I got it like all decorated. And then like I put in, like we presented at a conference. And so I put like our little conference, like you know, when it comes out on the agenda and stuff, like with your names, I printed that, I put that in there. So essentially it is a place for all of your awesomeness to be documented in like one spot. And when you're not feeling so great, go to your hype book, because I guarantee you the evidence of it is there. Because we're human, we tend to focus on the negative stuff, the stuff we're doing wrong, the stuff I like don't know how to do yet, the things that like that critical feedback that I got. Granted, not everybody is great with feedback, so it doesn't always feel super constructive. But there is also like all of the other amazing stuff that we're doing. And this is a way of like reframing and rewriting and like refocusing our mental energy on like the things that are going well. So I am now a huge fan of the hype book. Me and another friend here, like at U of H, we started like a little hype book club. So if you need some tips or whatever, come to me, I got you. But I absolutely love, I'm so grateful that I had that idea, and now I'm telling everybody. And it's not original, so I did not come up with that. So we have some other folks that have been willing to share about their experience. So let me share the floor first with Larissa.
Hi guys. So I'm a second year biology graduate student, like most of you know, and most of you don't know that I have been clinically diagnosed with general anxiety and depression. Like going off of some of the things that Laura said earlier, I had to be dragged like kicking, screaming, and crying to therapy my freshman year of college, because like I did not want to go. I did not think I needed help. But mental health issues like run in my family. So my brother actually has OCD, and he was having a really rough time his freshman year of high school, which was my senior year of high school. And I also went through a lot of like really socially isolating situations in high school as well. So I was not doing well my freshman year of college. So that's when I started going to therapy, and I feel so lucky that like my brother was actually the one that ended up like trying a bunch of different counselors, so that I was able to just go see the one that he was seeing, and she ended up being really good for me too. I've been going for 5 years now, and I still don't feel like I'm done. I still don't feel like I have everything figured out. Like we're still working on new things. I go every couple weeks, and I'm actually having to change therapists now because she's an OCD specialist and she's working with high-risk patients, and I'm not considered a high-risk patient anymore. So it's really nice because she's been able to like help me develop like healthy coping mechanisms and stuff, because I did have coping mechanisms when I was younger, but they weren't necessarily like productive. They weren't necessarily healthy. They weren't necessarily getting me anywhere. So I had to kind of work with my therapist to develop like a new skill set that would help me kind of cope with life moving forward. So I've always had academic imposter syndrome. Like I've been like an AP, pre-AP. So I feel like I've had a lot like expected of me since I basically started school. And it got to the point where it was just like, I feel like my expectations of myself started exceeding other people's expectations of me, just because I was so used to everyone kind of saying like, oh, you have to do this, like you're so smart, you have to do this. Like it got really stressful. And I know in high school when I started taking like AP classes, especially like pre-cal, you know, calculus, stuff like that, I was just so freaked out because I had like this preconceived notion that I was just terrible at math and I shouldn't be in that class and I shouldn't be doing calculus in high school. And I ended up going to tutoring a lot because I was like, I need to go to tutoring or else I'm gonna fail this test. Like I'm hopeless at math. Like if I'm not here, like getting extra help every day, I'm gonna fail. And I remember telling my teacher, like, I'm probably gonna fail this exam. And he was like, he looked at me funny and he was like, you're one of the ones that's going to get a perfect score. Like, don't tell yourself that. And I'm like, you're crazy, dude. Like, I'm not going to pass this exam. And then sure enough, when I got my score back, I had gotten a 5 on the exam. So that was kind of like a wake up call for me. Like, look, you know, all these people have like faith in you. So you need to have a little bit of faith in yourself as well. That did get kind of worse when I got into grad school though, because when I was applying to graduate school, I applied to like 10 schools and I only ended up getting to 2. So that was like a huge like blow to me, I guess, because it felt like when I did accept the offer that UH gave me, it was just like, oh, well, I got like rejected by all these other schools. So like, do I really belong in a PhD program? Should I really be in here? Like, maybe I'm not good enough because I got rejected by all these other schools. So that's been something that I've been kind of dealing with over the past couple of years as well. And another thing is that, you know, I've been in my same lab for almost 4 years now. And it's difficult because I'm actually the senior member of my lab now, because all of the other graduate students that were in there like defended and have moved on already. So it's really strange, like going from kind of an undergraduate role in the lab where other people are teaching me. I'm kind of doing like grunt work. I'm not expected to totally understand everything that's going on, to being the senior lab member and that everyone goes to when they need help. And it's expected that I know what's going on. I've been working on this for 4 years. Like, I'm supposed to know what's going on. So, but I haven't like internalized that, like, look, you know, you've been working in here for 4 years, like, you know what's going on, you have some knowledge in this field. I haven't internalized that yet. So it's really had an effect on my work, because one big thing that's happened recently is that like I had to give my first committee meeting, and my PI was like, you're not like taking ownership of your work. You're saying like, oh, like, you know, people in the past have done this, you know, this project is this, but you're not taking ownership of it. And it's affecting how you are proceeding with the project. You're not coming up with ideas yourself. You're waiting for me to tell you to do something. That's not, you know, how a PhD works. You need to come up with things. You need to, like, this is your project. This is your thesis. Like, you need to come up with these things by yourself. You can't just wait around for me to like tell you what to do. And that really got to me, I guess, because I realized that that's what I've been doing. Like, I've been telling myself, like, you don't know enough to, you know, make an informed decision about this. You don't know enough to come up with an experiment. You don't know this, you don't know that. But that's not true. I do know. And I should use that knowledge to design experiments and to help other members of my lab and stuff like that. So a couple of things that I've really noticed that have helped me and some of my cohort over this past year is that we talk it out. Like, you're the only you that there is, but there are other people that are in similar situation as you. So like, for example, we have like 20 people in our cohort, and I say something like, oh my God, like, I do not understand what's going on. And it takes me saying like, oh, I don't understand what's going on, for everyone else to be all like, okay, I didn't either. But until someone says that, everyone's just assuming everyone else knows what's going on. So the one piece of advice that I can give is that be a little bit vulnerable. Like, if you don't know what's going on, speak up about it, because likely you're not the only one in that situation. If you have a question, ask that question. Like, we're here to ask questions. We're here to learn. So if you have a question, then ask it, because it's very likely that someone else in your group has that same question. And like I was saying before, like, you're the only you that there is. Everyone's situation is unique. We all come from different backgrounds. We all come from different families. We all come from like different socioeconomics, like statuses, I guess. So it's just like, okay, like, don't be comparing yourself to everyone as well. Like, you need to acknowledge the fact that despite all the struggles that you've faced, that you're here. But it also does help to talk to other people about like what's going on in your life, about what you're feeling, because there's a high likelihood that everyone else is feeling a very similar way. And then you can be all imposters together.
I love that, Larissa. Thank you so much for sharing that and your experience there. I love how you talked about like, you know, it takes like one person like being brave enough to be like, I don't know what's going on. And then other people are like, oh my God, I'm so glad you said that. I had a really similar experience. Like just recently in one of my classes with like some homework, I was looking at this and thinking like, did we read that? Like, did we learn this? Like, I am looking, I don't know what we're talking about. And then like, it's like, oh my God, I don't know if I want to say this, like in this group chat, are they going to think like, what the hell is she doing here? I was like, let me just do it. And so I ripped the Band-Aid off and did it. And someone else was like, oh my God, I had the same question. Thank you. Okay, I'm not alone. And if anything, like, if I'm an imposter, then you're one too. And I'm okay with either one of those outcomes. Either I'm not, or I'm not the only one. And I can live with either outcome. But thank you. And also thank you for sharing like how like the thoughts of it can like kind of like develop with us like as we learn and like as we enter like different like roles and even different like educational spaces. Like I think these feelings can definitely take on like more intense qualities as we enter like more challenging environments. And like it can also, you know, practicing those new messages is like one thing, but I do like how you talked to like internalizing that is something different. Like internalizing that experience of like, oh yeah, okay, like I'm one of the more like experienced people here. Like we can know that, but then like believing it and the stuff that comes along with that and the confidence that comes with that are like oftentimes kind of separate processes. So thank you for sharing. I'm gonna turn it over to Alejandro.
All right, thank you. So I'm a third year physics PhD student. So one of the things I could tell you, even though everyone has this preconceived notion that like, oh, you're in physics, you must be like very smart, like big brain. And so whenever I told people, you know, I'm a physics major, like, oh, you're so brave, or like, oh, I hated physics. Like that's immediately what they tell me. I was like, I was so bad at math or something. I don't know if like any of the other physics majors have come across this, but that's something I've come across a lot. And my particular field is called experimental astroparticle physics. So whenever I say that to everyone, they're just like taking a step back, just like, okay, what did I just hear right now? So I just have to say, okay, so I basically make detectors, put them underground, and wait for particles to come in from space and interact with them. And in a sense, even though I'm not like the first generation to get a bachelor's degree in my family, I am the first generation in a sense to get a graduate degree. So at some point, my dad, who's also like a physics major, I didn't realize at the time when I'd started college, he'd been subtly egging me on to like, hey, you should take like physics and then like go into like aerospace engineering, which is what I wanted to do like at high school. And then I look over to his resume and it said like Bachelor of Physics from the University of Mexico. So I clicked on, oh, that makes sense. And he told me at one point when I was visiting, like, yeah, so when you came back from like your undergraduate classes, like my sophomore year, and I showed him my homework, he's like, yeah, at that point, I can't really help you with your math. You are operating at a level that is beyond me. So you are entered a realm that I can no longer follow you in. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, so I guess I'm at this point alone and I got to navigate through the rest of my degree and my research now of just like finding opportunities and then just being rejected from those opportunities. You know, I applied for like multiple things, first time round, got rejected. And you know, and the shitty thing about it is that the people, they don't have time to tell you why you were rejected, and so you don't have that feedback to improve yourself. So you just have to learn from yourself, from your mistakes, and just trying to like fix it, and then convince yourself that it is worthwhile to try again, and that you are capable of doing such things. One of my big issues that I have is just I tend to overthink things, and when that happens, and you get paralyzed in this state, like I just can't make a decision. Your mind goes blank, and then I realize that I just have to keep moving. Like even if I can't make a decision, I just have to improvise and just keep moving and trying to figure out what else I can do, like looking at it at a different angle when it comes to issues, especially with my research. I can tell you right now, like, getting that NSFG RFP, yeah, that was a big boost in my confidence, but I still feel like in my collaboration that, I just shouldn't be here because I don't know everything I need to know about my field. I sometimes feel like the odd one out in my professors group, because everyone in my group and the nearby groups, everyone's doing like neutrino physics. They're doing something studying neutrinos, and then here I am doing medical physics, just the one person doing something completely different, and no one can really help me because no one understands medical physics. And the field is like dominated by like all these companies that like have like their proprietary algorithms, and they don't want to share, and with papers that they tell you like, oh, we're using this type of algorithm, but they don't explain how they use it. So it's even more difficult to try to break into and try to understand and find the resources to really understand. That just contributes to more of the imposter syndrome. Like, oh, if I can't understand that, that's just proof that I just don't belong here. And then that feels like a part of like anxiety. And right around when I started graduate school, Dr. Sater, for a brief moment, when she had time, uh, had these meetings with a bunch of different graduate students from like different departments, and she invited me because she at the time was like kind of active in like advising our SACNAS chapter. So she's like, "Hey, you should come in. You're a physics person. I need a physics person in here." So, and the topic of imposter syndrome came up, and I can't remember exactly what she said, but it's something that she said you have to view it from a different perspective when it comes to these sorts of issues. And someone told her that it's just neurons randomly firing in your head. The scientist part of my head found this kind of comforting, like, oh, okay, now that you've identified really what's kind of going on in a simplistic way, even if it's like slightly incorrect, it sort of helps frame like, okay, it's not just this mysterious looming cloud that you can't really get rid of. It's something that it actually happens to other people. And I think the Michelle Obama video like really hit it on the nail. Is like it's really all in your head, and you really have to convince yourself and that you to keep moving forward and to really go on ahead with whatever position you're in, because chances are that there might be other people that also feel the same way, or there are people that actually should not belong there, and you just need that revelation to keep you need that revelation to come inside your head. And for me, it's just more difficult because again, I overthink. There's a lot of self-doubt, unable to make a decision. So it's just, yeah, like I think imposter syndrome is just one of those things. Like it's not exclusive to graduate school. It's everywhere, So even if you're not thinking about graduate school and your career, you might think about going to like industry. It's just going to pop up somewhere. And the important thing is like, how do you deal with it? And so, and once you've like taken steps to figure like to chip away this roadblock that you've come across, that also can like help you again, maybe something to add into your hype book, like I had a feeling of self-doubt, like, just this overwhelming fear that I just don't belong here, but then like you managed to pull through at the end, that could also help for when the next time you come across that wall again or a different wall, you can just refer back like I did this before. is this wall going to stop me now?
Yes, I love that so much, Alejandro. Thank you for sharing. And I love that like recommendation to be like, when you successfully conquer that self-doubt, like write that shit down and put that in there so that for the next time you have that like evidence, right? Yeah, I was really, really touched when you talked about like your like experience like with like math and with your dad, like when you got into grad school and like how he said like, okay, you like this is I can't help you anymore here, like from here on you're kind of on your own. Like that was really moving to hear. And it, yeah, I don't know, it just has me thinking about how like how that can contribute right to those feelings of like maybe I like really shouldn't be doing this, or like I shouldn't be here. And I also don't feel like there's enough recognition given to the experiences of like first gen grad students, because a lot of times we do focus on like first generation undergrads, and that's important, and like it's important to understand their experiences. And there's a lot of there's a lot of new things that come with graduate school that even for like folks who like you, I mean, have obviously made it successfully through undergrad in order to make it to your graduate career, but there are so many new things that pop up that weren't a part of undergrad that can definitely lead to some of these feelings. So, I appreciate you for being willing to share. Sorry, before we get, can I check in on time? Like, how are we doing?
It's 6:30. I don't mind going for a little longer if you guys don't mind. I don't know, if you guys have to leave, you can. I know we said it was going to be an hour and a half, but if you guys want to stay, that we have like, I think 1 or 2 more sections left.
Yeah, like 2 quick more sections left. So if you want to bear with us, that is very much welcome. Maybe I can just like move us forward, and if there are things that you'd like to share, please feel free to jump in or use the chat to share what you're connecting with. So the next part that we wanted to touch on is stress management and time management. I actually really love these things, so I was hoping to like get some support in like talking through these.
Yeah, that was me. I saw like the blank slide. I'm like, is there something here? I should probably fill it in. I'm sorry.
But go for it.
Yeah, so I actually started getting experience like early on with like time management when in high school, when I was sort of thrust into musical theater. So I was in choir in high school, and my choir teacher was like, hey, you need to do this musical theater, like The Wizard of Oz. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, you agreed to this. Like, I did. And so I didn't realize how much of a commitment it was. So I was already stressed with classes, and now I got like this musical theater that I'm apparently a part of. And so, and turns out, you know, you guys might have run into this issue as well. And so like so you can go through it, but like it comes to a point where like, are you properly managing? Are you walking your way through it, or are you stumbling down through it? You know, let's see what's going on. So some of the signs that, you know, I've sort of put on here from experiences that I've heard from college and just high school, you know, pulling all-nighters every time a deadline arises. I think pulling all-nighters every once in a while, you know, that's fine. You know, you want to polish your work, but if it's happening every time, you know, that's not healthy, both physically for your sleep schedule and just, you know, like work ethic wise. You know, that there's something going on, that you just need to prioritize things better. And that leads me to my other thing, like consistent poor sleep schedule. You know, sleep's important. You shouldn't skimp out on it. I love sleep. You're not going to deprive me of sleep if I have to finish. No, I am going to bed at a certain time, and I'm waking up at a certain time. Nothing's more important than sleep, other than, I guess, basic survival instincts. But you know, sleep's important. You know, missing and forgetting appointments. Have a terrible memory, so I constantly forget stuff. So I have to write stuff down. So missing and forgetting appointments is just a sign that, you know, there might be some organization that might need to be involved in your life that you need to implement. And there's also the feeling like, you know, you're being stretched thin, you don't have time to do what you like. And so a lot of people say like, oh, you should just work hard. No, you should be smarter about it. You know, if I think the point is like the less effort you can do, the better, and the less effort and the more intelligent that you can put into something, the better it is. You know, what the prime example being nature itself. You know, we learn in physics that nature likes to keep particles in the lowest energy state. She doesn't like to put things in the higher energy state because, you know, that takes effort. And energy wants to be in the lower state, and there's actually smart ways that the laws of physics have equated to go around this principle of being in the lowest energy state. So the idea is that you want to put just the right amount of effort, just the right amount of energy and the thought into something to succeed your goals, because you don't want to waste all of your energy on one thing and then the next thing comes and you don't have enough energy for it. So asking yourself, is this important? When is this due? Do I have any help? And it really helps if you're upfront and honest with people. You know, when it comes to just like sending out an email like, hey, I need you to be at this meeting at this time. If you don't say anything, then this person's just going to assume like, okay, either they didn't get the message or they just, you know, saw the email and just agreed and they just forgot to message me. But if there's actually something that comes up, that person can't really help you if you don't tell them about it. You know, communication is important and everyone preaches it, but it's not really said enough to the point where like people don't really tell other people that, you know, they have these issues going on and that might affect them. There's not this thought process that goes on that says maybe what I'm going through right now is probably going to affect how I can perform optimally in the certain tasks that I'm in. So maybe I should inform people that, you know, this is happening, and not as like a way to like, oh, go be easy on me, but, you know, just so that they are aware that this is what's going on and what I'm dealing with. And, you know, chances are they're like this, they'll say, okay, I understand. But, you know, other chances might be is like they'll actually try to help you. No, because it does, if you're part of a team, it doesn't make sense for like a team member to just like abandon you. You know, you're part of a team. If like one person fails, you know, everyone else does. So it's in everyone's interest to help each other out. So, and I think like overall, people generally want to help other people out. It's just being upfront and open with your communication can really help foster that.
Yeah, awesome. All of this was awesome. So thank you for speaking to that. And I really appreciate the like physics lens that you can take to the, I don't have that. So that is actually really helpful for me to hear. So just a couple of things, honestly, that I would just add on at the end is one of the things that I do think can be really helpful, and Alejandro was speaking to this as well, is just kind of knowing when you're entering stress. Like I think we all have different signals that tell us when stress is starting to like set in for us. And I like to think of them as kind of being sorted into like 3 buckets, that we've got like a physical symptom bucket, a mental symptom one, and then a behavioral one. And just because we're all different and we're all unique, like we might become aware of one of these like sooner than another. So if you know how stress tends to manifest for you, then it makes it a little easier to catch it earlier on. And then the earlier we can do something about it, then the better off we ultimately are. And for me, like the physical stuff is what I tend to notice the most. Like I will begin to be aware of like when I feel tension, like in my, I tend to hold it like in my shoulders, in my jaw, and I'll clench my teeth. Like, and if I'm not paying attention, I don't realize it until I have like a headache at the end of the day. I'm like, why does my like head hurt? Oh, I've been holding my jaw closed for like 8 hours, so that probably explains it. So I tend to notice tension. But again, for other folks, like it might be different. Maybe you have tension show up in another spot in your body, or instead of like holding, maybe you find yourself like kind of jittery or like kind of needing to like move all the time. In the mental space, like it might be like in the form of like worry or like thoughts that kind of race through your mind, trouble concentrating. And behaviorally, this is another one that I start to tend to notice, is I just want to get on my phone like a lot and just sort of like scroll through Instagram, or I'm too old for TikTok, or like Facebook or something, again, kind of old. So I'll just like want to do that and sort of check out instead of reading or writing or any of those other things that I probably should be doing. So, you know, knowing what kinds of things we also tend to engage in when we kind of want to check out or like avoid or just kind of go numb for a little bit. Again, if we know what those are for us, then we can be aware when they pop up. So I wanted to include this, and then just a few extra tips. So again, knowing your stress signals just makes you aware, and it allows you to be able to step in and manage. The earlier we do that, the more successful we can be, and the more quickly we can be successful at that. I don't know which order to go in. Assessing your coping strategies. So, you know, kind of like mentioned earlier, are your coping strategies working? Are they losing some effectiveness? Are there some ways to, we're going to jump around a little bit. Are there some ways to experiment with some different like things to try around like managing your stress or managing your time, and maybe a new system that you could try to put in place? I just recently had to change like agendas again. I'm old, so I need like pen and paper, hard copy of something to like look at, physically write things down. And what I had, like it was not working. I needed something with time blocks throughout the day, because my old thing was just kind of open where I could write it in, and I was forgetting to write stuff, or something that was happening later would happen first, and so it'd be first, and then the earlier thing would come after. It was a mess. And so I was like, I just need something with time so that I can write everything in. So assess honestly how things are working and see if you might need to experiment with something else. Setting reasonable goals about what we can accomplish makes us more likely to be successful. So to the degree that we can, you know, set some boundaries or limits on what we can like reasonably take on. It's very hard for me to do because I just want to do all the things all the time. And then I realize that I can't, or I start to do some things very poorly, and that's not good. So knowing where like we can set some boundaries or say no can be really beneficial in the stress department, as well as focusing on the things that are in our control. So sometimes our stress or distress at the same time can come from, you know, focusing on the things that are not in our control. And those feelings of helplessness and powerlessness can exacerbate the distress we're experiencing. So what can we control in, you know, in the situation? One of the things that's really stressful to me right now is a bit around our return to campus. As much as I want it, and I want to be in real live face-to-face community with people, it also makes me anxious because we're still in a pandemic and my baby can't get vaccinated yet, and it makes me nervous. I can't control having to be on campus and work. Like, that comes from above me and I can't do anything about that. What I can control is wearing a mask and encouraging students I see to wear masks and disinfecting my office after in-person visits. Like, I can do all of that. But the more I focus on the bureaucracy and the politics, none of which I can affect, it just like ramps up my stress level. And then, like, our theme of today is reaching out for support, whatever that might look like for you. So peers, friends, colleagues, family, like a counselor, like all of those and more are, you know, the more support systems that we have built for ourselves, the better off we are. So let me see, and I'm going to turn it back to Larissa to talk a little bit about her experience with time and stress management.
Yes, so I will tell you guys that I have had to repeatedly experiment with different time management and stress management coping mechanisms. So one thing that I kind of want to point out to you guys is like time management is hard. Like there isn't a formula for it. There isn't one thing that works for everyone. And same with stress management, different things work for different people. So I think like Alejandro was saying, like I've had issues like since high school because I was in ROTC, I was in choir, I was in theater, like I had a lot going on. And then when I was an undergraduate, I was taking like 15 or more hours per semester. I was working in the lab and I had a part-time job. So like I've always had just like crazy amounts of stuff going on. So one thing that my therapist had originally told me is like plan out your day, like Laura was saying earlier, like get an agenda that has like times on it and then fill those time slots and stick to your schedule. That works for a lot of people. For me, it had the opposite effect because when I would lay out my schedule and I would have my time grid and I'm like, okay, from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, I'm going to be doing this and that and the other thing. It just got so stressful because when my schedule deviated from what I had on paper, I got freaked out because I'm like, okay, I have less time to do this other thing later on in the day. And that just got to be too much for me. So I stopped doing the time grid thing. And my therapist actually recommended to me to do like, okay, today's 3 goals are this. So that's when you like pick a number of goals for the day that works for you. For me, it's 3. So it's like, okay, today I need to finish that homework assignment. I need to do this thing in the lab and I need to do this thing at home. And those are my 3 goals for today. I need to do laundry or whatever. And if I accomplish those 3 things in that day, then okay, I have like this sense of peace that I got accomplished, like what I needed to get accomplished for that day. And another thing that's really helped me is like, I get distracted a lot. I have a very short attention span and I cannot focus on one thing for like an extended period of time. So I used to like sit myself down for like a day and be all like, okay, all I'm doing today is like this assignment or this piece of writing that I have to do. But then I would waste so much time because I would be like, oh, I got a notification on my phone. Oh, someone sent me a TikTok. Like I had to go see that. Like I would get so distracted. So another thing that was recommended to me by one of my peers, actually, it was the Pomodoro technique. And there's actually a lot of really cool apps that help you with that. So basically it's you work in 20-minute intervals. For 20 minutes, you like throw your phone on the other side of the room and focus on what you're doing. And then when the timer goes off, you get a 5-minute break to do whatever you want. And then after that 5 minutes is up, you do another 20 minutes, complete focus. And then when that 20 minutes is up, another 5-minute break. And then you do that a couple times and then you get a long break for like an hour and you can go eat lunch, you can take a nap, whatever you want. And then you start over again. And I found this is a lot more helpful because it's easier for me to tell myself, okay, you only have to focus for this 20 minutes, then you have to focus for 8 hours and finish this assignment. Like that's a gargantuan task. So another thing that I want to say is like, don't let the stress get out of hand. Like you need to learn to recognize your signals of stress and your signals of burnout. So another, one of the physical kind of signs I was noticing that I have from earlier is that I get like a complete loss of appetite when I'm stressed or when I'm anxious. I completely lose my appetite. So I will go like days without eating. And that is really, really bad because I am already severely underweight. So I can't not eat because that will be very detrimental to my health. So like I need to eat. You tell yourself to eat, right? Tell yourself to like stop doing, or you have to actively work against like those things that you're doing. Like if it's attention, you have to tell yourself, okay, relax, like let that tension out. you have to actively work against that. And breaks are essential. So one thing that I've noticed is that if I'm burning out, my productivity is a lot lower than it would be if I just took a break and then came back and everything would be fine. So you really need to take a break. Don't let yourself burn out before you take a break. Definitely, if you start to notice these signs and just say like, hey, like Alejandro was saying earlier, I'm sleeping now. This is not worth an all-nighter. I'm sleeping now. This can wait until morning. So definitely give yourself those breaks.
Yes, so important. Thank you. And thanks for mentioning the Pomodoro technique. That can actually be really effective for like lots of folks. So I do hope if you haven't heard of it until today, like get on Google or check out some of the, like Larissa said, like the many apps that are out there, because it is so much easier to just like mentally know, okay, like I've just got like 20 minutes instead of like 2 hours or like even longer. So yes, and don't wait until you're burnt out to take a break, because then we need a much longer break. The break's not as helpful. It's just it's a whole thing. Yeah, so thank you. Alejandro, do you want to talk about this?
Yes. So when it comes to doing research, people have different styles of how they like to work. You know, some people like to just focus on one project. I myself like to focus on multiple projects. You know, that might seem ass backwards, you know, because you're just adding more work to you. And like, no, because when I hit a roadblock in one of the projects, I can just go to the other project and just move in there. And then in the back of my head, the problem is just going to be solved, and I'll just get an idea of what I could do for the other issue. So I work on not only medical imaging physics, but I work on particle detector R&D. So I got pictured here, like this is the detector we had for dark side 50 in a clean room. You know, for this experiment, it has to be absolutely clean. So, and on top of like, you know, learning new skills for my research, I help run an organization, you know, with like a mentorship program, engaging the community, designing materials for like the organization meetings, and you know, and outside of like of school and extracurricular activities, I have like hobbies. You know, I recently came on a bike ride. I've been doing more biking, and I've been enjoying it. But I also like to 3D print. So I also have pictured here a frog who has now become our mascot in our organization. We call him Fred, and he comes in many variations. And it's been such a great hit in Catspec that people are now requesting Freds. So I guess I've gotten like a new side business, and like as we're speaking right now, I'm having a Fred printed.
Oh my god.
So
can I buy a Fred? I want
yeah, totally. Yeah. So, and really it's like for me to just like figure out, okay, how do I optimize my 3D printing? Because I really want to get good at like 3D printing and print some of like the amazing stuff like these people I see online that are printing. So it just comes to like, okay, I want to do all this, but I can't like stop time and just do all sorts of things and then like just restart time, because you know the laws of physics forbid that because of entropy and stuff, you know, whatever. Anyways, Google Calendar, that's everyone's friend, but like Larissa said, you know, blocking off times for stuff, you know, that doesn't really help. That doesn't help for me. It's primarily because stuff is unpredictable. You know, Murphy's Law, whatever can happen will happen. It's, for instance, my professor, you know, he's incredibly busy. He's part of like all sorts of different collaborations, and just starts coming to campus more often. He's like, hey, we're going to be coming to campus more often. You guys want to grab some lunch? Like to me and my other lab mates, and like, yeah. Like this guy's been gone for like months, haven't heard from him, and then like, you want to have lunch? Yeah, we haven't had dinner to celebrate your accomplishments. So let's go have lunch. And so we spend like an hour or two just discussing just random topics, and it's like, oh shit, we got to get back to work. And so it's like, I'm like, okay, blocking out time doesn't work. So what I do, blocking out specific time blocks doesn't work. What I do is I have a list of just bullet point lists, but keep it simple. And my advice is just you have to make some of the bullet points specific, and specific it is, the better. Primarily for me, because I constantly forget things, and some details are important, and it's best to like have some of those bullet points be like easy stuff that you can do, because I think this has to do with some sort of like a brain trick, is where the way we rationalize things, if we can't cross anything out, then we get demoralized and discouraged, like, oh, I can't accomplish anything. But that feeling of crossing something off of your list, that's, even though it's like a minuscule accomplishment compared to some of the other goals that you have set, it's still something that tells you that you are progressing forward. And it just sort of like keeps you going forward for the other goals that you have set, and subdividing goals, adding extra details and just crossing those out. And then on the side, if they have a due date, I'll write that down. The only thing that I would block off time for is appointments or meetings, because it's expecting like, okay, this meeting is probably going to take like an hour and a half. That's what I expect. And if it goes over, I'll have to let people know that I have to actually go now. So, but really when it comes to completing tasks, it's just doing work for certain projects, having a list of prioritizing what needs to come first, what's easy, and what I can knock out first. That also helps a lot in managing all sorts of different things that you got going on in your life. Because it might seem that because once you've organized it, you've decreased the amount of chaos in there. You might actually find out like, oh, this is actually doable. So also, experience is the best teacher. It's going to go without saying that you are going to mess up, and you should not be afraid of that. You should not let that paralyze you and prevent you from just going in and trying things. Like Laura said, think about it as failing forward. You're here in school, you're going to make mistakes, but the thing is, like, you're going to learn from those mistakes. So.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much, Alejandro. And I do love crossing off some to-do list items. It is so satisfying. Sometimes if I like haven't written a thing, but I've already done a thing, I'll write it so I can just cross it. Oh, so satisfying. Yes. And yeah, this is so helpful to hear like what's working for y'all, because I think it goes to like demonstrate that point that like different things work for different people. Like you have to find the system that works really well for you. And I know some people mentioned that in the chat, so that was really helpful. So feel free to continue contributing what helps you with time management, stress management, and coping in general. And then we'll jump into our next session, which I really wanted to leave this part for anecdotal, because I think the experience part of this is really what we can learn some of the most from. So I'm going to jump into Jacob.
Okay, so I have a lot of anecdotal stories for dealing with authority or conflicts with authority. I was going to narrow it down just with a couple of more recent ones later on. I'm sure like in research, especially in graduate school, dealing with authority is like almost like a necessary component, or it's like an inevitable component. I think it'd be the better way of putting it. You have your PI, you have your committee, and these are just like a few examples. Like you also have professors, like when you're learning from or who are teaching you. And conflict is eventually going to be inevitable. So you do have to kind of prepare yourself for it. And that can be kind of hard sometimes. A few examples that I have. So in the spring, I was applying to a NASA fellowship. It was something that I was very excited to do. And we were working with a joint project with another professor in my department. Well, this fellowship had a very interesting component where it had to have what's called a NASA technical advisor. So you had to have a person from NASA who was basically sponsoring the work. And my PI was under the assumption, even though it was explained that this couldn't be the case, that this other professor that works in this department could be that technical advisor. I was probably about a week into, or about 2 weeks into applying for this fellowship, I had basically 6 pages of a research proposal written out, and the plug was pulled on it. Basically, I was no longer applying for this fellowship because we had to basically, we did not need, or we couldn't figure out the NASA technical advisor aspect. So that was very disheartening. One of my dreams is to work for NASA, basically, and receiving that fellowship would have been great. I think a key component there was that there needed to be better communication. And one thing that kind of resulted from this is there was also a confusion during this whole mix-up where my PI was thinking that this other professor was going to take me as a student. That way I could work on this fellowship, which was not the case at all. So there was just a lot of communication breakdowns. So I think it's very, very important to keep communicated with your PI or your committee members, whatever, and make sure that communication is clear as well. That's something I had definitely learned from my mistake. I'm much more clear when communicating with my PI now and explaining things and making sure that everything is getting across correctly, and as well as vice versa. Another big one for me I can give is just recently happened last week. I lost a gel which had about a week's worth of product on it and didn't have backups. And the way I lost that gel was I was transporting it to the blue light so I could see the bands. It slid off onto the ground as I was walking and I stepped on it. So let's just say PI was not very happy with me for obvious reasons. And that was a very, very hard lesson to learn. But I think one big thing, there was a bit of a learning coaching moment for my PI. And I learned that that was a mistake. I need to learn from that mistake for sure and be very careful with like gels, experiments, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's just these stories will keep compounding, right? Eventually, like you're going to run into some kind of conflict. There's going to be a disagreement. Something will happen. Something unexpected comes up. You just have to learn to deal with it as the time comes, right?
Really, really valuable lessons. And I know that they are not learned in some pleasant ways. So I appreciate you being willing to share with us, Jacob. Thank you. And Arnold.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna leave my video off because my connection has been terrible. I've been disconnecting and reconnecting. But basically, I had a few big points and I'm still working on this myself 100% because it's hard. It's hard to do, especially with anxiety and the other things that I have on top of it. It's just hard to deal with conflicts and maybe conflict with authority. But you should just remember in your head that conflict is okay. It's important for people to respect you when you disagree. I mean, that is a really big, major sentiment that kind of sticks with me that my sister actually told me and tries to get me to listen to, is that it's important for people to respect you when you disagree. No matter how far away you are from each other on the topic, all that's needed is respect. Another thing is that you should not be afraid for telling people when what they're asking for is unreasonable. And so that is a really big problem for me. I have a lot of trouble doing this. But yeah, that's definitely something that you need to work on as well. Like being able to say, I am not okay, this is too much for me, and I'm gonna need either more time, I'm gonna need less work. So something that I do is I just lay out my whole schedule and I say, I have class from 5:30 to 7 on this day and this day. And then I have class from 2 to 4 on this day and this day. And I've set aside this side for research and that's it. And if we need more time, it's going to be, I mean, we're going to have to lessen the work or lessen the load. So that's something that I still am working on really hard. And it's very hard to do, but yeah, there are other things to look out for are small microaggressions or ageism. And I kind of experienced this in the first paper I've ever co-authored. That was a huge deal for me because I was so excited to be on a paper, to get this to finally publish, to get my name out there, to get my work out there. And basically what happened is that one of the project managers asked me for something at the end of the week. And I thought in my head that meant Sunday. I guess this person thought Friday, but that was not specified. And so a conflict arose, and I told her, like, just give me the extra 2 days, I'll get it to you. And basically from there, I was threatened. And the project manager said, I'm gonna go to your boss and get you off this paper. I'm gonna call and I'm gonna do this. And I have anxiety and I have depression and I don't have a backup. As I was saying earlier, not from a very affluent background. And so that was scary to me. And that was a real threat for me. But ultimately that was not okay on her part. I talked to my PI about it, and in my opinion, it could have been handled better because this was within my own lab, but it's over. We have talked through it. It's better. But it's something that I learned definitely that people need to respect you. They need to respect your deadlines, and you should not be, you don't have to deal with microaggressions or things like ageism or sexism. It's not okay, and you are allowed to stand up for yourself. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Arnell. Wow, that like conflict that you described sounds really intense and like super intense reaction.
Yes.
Something
Yes.
you just could have been more clear about it. But no, I definitely feel you on all of that, like especially the like setting boundaries and like saying no if like what you're being asked to do, like if you really don't have the room for it. I am definitely still working on that for myself too. And depending on like even I think it's important to mention too, like I'm sure like folks have experienced this, that it can be really hard to say no when there's power differentials at play, or if they're like depending on the identities that you hold, like it might be more difficult to say no, or the experiences that you've had. So it is definitely much harder in practice, and sometimes the dynamics might make it really hard for us to do that. But I definitely agree and feel like that is a really common thing that that can come up. So thanks for speaking to that.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so I think, let's see. So I want to invite folks to definitely share, and not just necessarily on this piece, but on anything that we've talked about so far tonight, about what has helped you in the navigation like of these structures so far. And I wanted to also let folks know that there are resources to help you navigate any and all of these experiences that you might find yourself having now or later. Please do know that CAPS is a resource. We are here for you with the anxiety, the depression, the imposter syndrome, the stress management, all of the above and more. We are absolutely here to support you. And we have a wide range of services, everything from, 20-minute consultations to your typical like individual counseling and beyond and in between. So we offer a variety because different things are going to work for different folks at different times. So you might want to check us out for an anxiety workshop, or maybe come to us for one of our group counseling options for a semester. So there's many different things that might support you with what you're dealing with, and we are here to help you find what that is. So if you're curious or you just want to reach out for a consultation, you can call us at this number, or visit us during our triage hours from 10 to 4, Monday through Friday. And the other thing that I love among our services is our Let's Talk program. So if you haven't heard about it yet, please go to our website and learn more about it. I think it's a great informal way to just learn some more about CAPS and to just receive some support, consultation, resources, whatever you might need in that space. Also a huge fan of wellness and what they do over in their department, and they support students across the wellness spectrum. So if you are looking for ways to manage your time better, or you want to get better sleep, or really Those are just a couple of examples of the many areas that they have expertise in. And Wellness offers free 30-minute consultations with students on any wellness related topic, from individual to interpersonal and relational, and all kinds of great stuff. And they have those available for reservation on their website. So it's really handy. It's a great resource to have while we're here. And I think they're a great complement to any of the individual things that you might be pursuing. Larissa, did you have something?
I'm just going to say that I'm going to stop recording now